In this video, we'll talk about how we can read time series data, how we can group by time, and how we can resample based on time. The file that we're reading is just a simple text file, and what's special is that every line has a fixed length. We also call that format fixed width formatted lines. And for these kind of files, we have a function called readFWF, which stands for fixed width formatted. And so if we read that file, it returns us a simple data frame. So this first column here is interpreted as the index, and then the other two columns are here columns 1 and 2. And so if we now check the index of this data frame, we see that it's a simple integer index. And that's of course not what we want, since these are clearly years, and so they should be interpreted as timestamps. And to achieve that, we can pass the argument infer datetime format. We set that to true, and we also specify with parse states which columns correspond to time data. So here the first column 0, but also the second one. So we could say that in this text file, the second column corresponds to months. And if we then pass these two things and run our code, then we now have a proper time index, and we can check the index and it tells us the type is datetime64. So these are all timestamps. We can also call .plot to plot our data. And because our series is now indexed by timestamps, we can aggregate based on time. So for example, here we have all the years from the indices, and then we take them into the group by operation. So that will create a group for every year. And then for these groups, we calculate the mean and then print the head of that data frame. Now we can also plot this data. And maybe let's take the old plot for comparison. So that's the normal data, and here we have a mean value for every year, which is based on all the values that were measured in that year. We can also use pd.grouper to perform more complex groupings. So for example, we can create a group for every 5 years. So we set the frequency in the pd.grouper to 5 years. The same can also be done for days. So instead of 5 years, we pass days. And what's interesting here is that we get a lot of nonce. And that's because we increased the frequency of our data. So the original data didn't contain values for every day, but now we're trying to create a group for every day, and that results in missing values. To avoid that, we can go into resampling, which can change the frequency at which our data is sampled. So here we are first creating a new data frame where we pick all entries that were recorded in the year 1950. We can also plot that. And we see that we have one value for each month. And so we can increase the frequency of our data by saying that we want a data point every 12 days. And normally this should give us missing values. But here we specify for the method argument ffill, which stands for forward fill. And so if we plot our data, we can see that some values got filled in. And if we run this here, then we can compare the different fill methods. So up here in this plot, we didn't apply any fill. So here we just called on our data frame the as frequency with 12 days. And because our original data does not have a value every 12 days, we're even missing a lot of data points that were originally in the dataset. So this will go through our data in steps of 12 days. And if there is a value for that date, then it will take that value. But if there's no value, then we just get a missing value. And so to avoid it, we can use the forward fill. And so instead of then just placing a missing value, we fill in the values in a forward direction. So here we can see in green the original values, and the blue values are the ones that are sampled at a 12-day frequency. And so in this first spot here, everything is lining up. And so even without filling and according to our 12-day frequency, we have some data. But then for this data point here, so 12 days after the first one, there's no value from the original data frame. And so what we do is we fill in a forward direction. So we take the original value and fill it forward until we filled in all the potentially missing values. And we do that until we have a new original value. So for these new 12-day points here, we can use this original value to fill them in. And that continues for the whole year. The opposite happens for the backwards fill. So here again, the points line up, so we don't have to worry. But then here there's no value from the original data. And so we go to the next original value and then fill backwards until all the potentially missing values are filled. We can also downsample our data. So up here we had 12 days and here we now have 3 months. And this then looks like this here. One thing that should be noted is that we don't interpolate. So you might be thinking, okay, we have this point here, and this here in between is some kind of interpolation, but that is just a normal line plot connecting these points here. So this line might as well be gone, but then it would be of course confusing to read, for example, this plot here. And even though we're downsampling, the forward fill could have also been relevant. Not in this case, since all the points here line up with the original data. But let's say instead of doing 3 months, which could be equivalent to 12 weeks, we do 13 weeks, which is still downsampling. And it may still look like the points line up, so let's increase to 15 weeks. And now we can see properly how the forward fill is used. So here fills to here, that fills to there, and that fills to there. Resampling can also be combined with aggregation. So here we have some stock data that records some value at different times, and we can here just select the column close. And we're passing here both to the resample and to the as frequency BA, which stands for business year. And so the difference is that the as frequency is just taking original values at a different frequency. So we can see in green here, it's picking that value, then that value, so on. And the resample works more like a group by. So we group by the business years and then on the groups aggregate the mean, and that gives us then this orange line here.